Hi, I'm Andrew Rodriguez, and welcome to PsychoBible, babbling about psychology and theology. So apparently this weekend was National Coming Out Day. And of course, Joe Biden, ever the virtue signaler, just had to say something. So let's see what he had to say. I want every member of the LGBTQ plus community to know you are loved and accepted just as you are, whether you've come out or not. I'll fight every day in the White House to create a country where you can live open, proud, and free, without fear. Hashtag National Coming Out Day. And so here was my message to go along with that. They already can, Joe. They already can live open, proud, and free. And even they can do that in America without fear. But apparently, they're not allowed to pursue change. They're not allowed to change their mind on adopting an LGBTQ plus identity. So if you really want to fight for the rights of people with same-sex attraction or gender nonconformity, fight for their freedoms, fight for their rights to change their mind, to change their lifestyle, to change their relationships, to change their behavior. If you really want to fight for a sexual minority that is really being persecuted right now. And one thing people tend to forget is that in that LGBTQ whatever grouping, there are actually two Qs. First Q everyone knows is queer. The other one is questioning. So, how are you supporting the rights of the questioning when you are removing one of their options? What if they're questioning the actual same-sex attraction identity that they've previously held? What if they're like, well, what if I want to pursue heterosexuality now? Do they have the right to do that? Are you really supporting the questioning? Those who aren't sure if they want to adopt an LGBTQ plus identity, but you're removing the options for them? Yeah. Let's rethink this a bit more. The tone deafness of these posts, the virtue signaling that comes from these politicians. Months ago when he announced that he was running, he said that his campaign would all be about advancing LGBTQ rights. And it's like, what is left? After a birch fell and all these bathroom bills and the rights of trans athletes to compete with the opposite sex, there's really, it sounds like you're running out of stuff to fight for. Instead, what we're seeing is more and more persecution and censorship of people with same-sex attraction, gender confusion, gender nonconformity, but who are desisting or detransitioning. More and more of their voices are being banned, censored, and their rights being violated. The right to obtain the therapy or counsel, whether by a professional therapist or a pastoral care worker of some sort of ministry, are constantly being under assault. See, in July, Facebook and Instagram, which Facebook owns, announced that they were going to be banning any content promoting so-called conversion therapy. Which, for you, maybe if you're not too educated on this, you hear conversion therapy and you think, oh, that's some sort of pseudo-scientific quackery, pseudo-psychology used to force people to change their sexual orientation. And you're probably thinking it usually involves things like aversive techniques, like electroshock and ice baths and forced vomiting and all these bizarre stuff that you've heard from the media and bogus movies like Boy Erased and the education of whatever that movie was. But you probably aren't aware that everything you're hearing from the educational institutions, from social media, from the government bans on sexual orientation change efforts or conversion therapy, reparative therapy bans, everything you're hearing from them is pretty much all false. Now, if you also dig deeper, you'll see that, well, these bans don't just define conversion therapy as those approaches. It also includes any form of talk therapy or just traditional counseling that seeks to aid clients in changing behaviors, sexual identity or gender identity, or attractions in any way, no matter what approach they're using. And it doesn't matter if the client is looking for it voluntarily or they're being coerced. Not necessarily by the therapist, but maybe by family members if the client is a minor. So the bans themselves ban everything. That's just taking maybe what might be an actual problem, even though if you do the research, you will see in all these states where they've passed bans against counseling for unwanted same-sex attraction, not one of them have had a complaint to the licensing boards about therapists doing this type of work. So they're fighting a phantom that doesn't even exist as far as the problem of this therapy. It's preemptive, and it's all built on myths and lies. So, what might be an actual problem, if there are some fringe therapists out there or some therapists who have used unethical approaches to help people with their own goals of exploring their attraction change or gender identity change to align with their biology, instead of treating the actual issue, dealing with the actual issue such as the approach used or the types of guarantees or promises or words used to market it, instead of using a sniper rifle, they're using an atomic bomb. And so they're destroying any possibility of help for clients, whether they're adult or adolescents out there. So if you're just one of the ignorant masses, you hear about conversion therapy, you probably just go right along with whatever you've heard on Wikipedia. Watch this video, probably get one of those stupid Wikipedia in-context windows on YouTube that links you to an article that is highly curated by left-wing propagandists and contains only biased information and no information directly from sources, from actual people who do the therapy they're supposedly talking about. So you're probably just going to go along with the narrative, in other words. So to hear, well, of course they should stop promoting that stuff. That's terrible. It's harmful. And if that's what you believe, then I would encourage you to watch my video series addressing the myths and misunderstandings about so-called conversion therapy. Now, this was back in July that Facebook announced this. And around the same time, the UN's so-called expert on conversion therapy presented his findings to the UN. Now, we had come across this research or survey he was doing. It was late in the year. It was 2019 in December that my colleagues and I from Voice of the Voiceless learned about him taking responses from different interested parties. So we wrote up a response to him. He already had his opinion made up, though. You could already tell what he had believed about so-called conversion therapy. And so we had to write up a response correcting all these myths that he believed. More on that in a future video. But it had been months since we issued that response to him, and so in June or July of 2020, he presented to the UN his so-called findings, and he included his recommendation that so-called conversion therapy be outlawed globally. So right there you see a global effort to persecute and prosecute and outlaw any therapist or pastoral counselor or ministry that assists people with their own goals of exploring their heterosexual potential, if they have same-sex attraction, to reaffirm or develop security in their true gender identity based on their biology, or to work through what a client may believe may be the source of their unwanted same-sex attraction, whether it's abuse or unmet needs growing up, some form of trauma. A client may present these as what they believe are the root issues, and they want to work through those. But because that is now considered conversion therapy, and conversion therapy is considered harmful because people say it is, even though there's a dearth of scientific or rigorous scientific evidence to prove that assertion, there's now a concerted effort worldwide to prohibit people from accessing counseling that matches their own goals and values, therefore leaving only one form of therapy available: the gay affirmative or LGBTQ plus affirmative therapy. A therapy that will actively encourage someone to adopt a lesbian, gay, bi, transsexual, whatever. There's a plethora of identities in that group. And so what did we see after that UN presentation? More and more nations saying we're going to commit to banning this therapy, and not just for minors. Like we've been seeing in the US, most of the bans have been for minors. But globally now we're seeing more and more efforts to ban it nationwide or in different provinces. During the summer, Queensland in Australia banned the therapy as well, and there's enough backlash that it was highly revised, but more to come for sure. And so when Facebook announced their plans to ban anything promoting what they consider conversion therapy, even though that's not a term any of us in this field use, and we absolutely repudiate any claims of harm done in our approaches or therapeutic techniques that use aversion or coercion, pain of any sort or shaming of any sort. We know that these plans to ban and censor any of these counseling approaches or techniques will include us. Anyone who speaks out against the LGBTQ narrative. This lobby is huge, powerful, well-financed. They are not punching up. Trust me. So we weren't sure exactly how it was going to play out. There was no immediate removal of our pages. I'm part of several pages for people who are struggling with same-sex attraction or gender identity issues, not as a struggler myself, but as a counselor. And so I've been invited to be a member of a lot of these groups, and our groups weren't shut down right away, so we weren't sure what was going to happen. But we were seeing some troubling signs. For example, Mike Davidson in the UK and his ministry, Core Issues Trust, was constantly being attacked online. You could check out a video where he goes into it, all the ways that these trolls were harassing them, taking their emails and assigning them up for like porn subscriptions, and copying them, making it sound like they're saying things that they weren't. So they were constantly being harassed, and when they would try to report these incidents, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram would do nothing. They were not being helped in any way. And their videos were being taken down, they were being reported, just constantly. And if you watch his content, look, Mike he's a strong guy. He's got a lot of resilience, but he is so kind and gentle in the way he presents himself. So he's not abrasive in any way. Well, of course, in the UK, they were planning to ban so-called conversion therapy as well. And a website, Christian Today, interviewed him earlier this summer. And Mike made a point in this interview that is so important. He says, if it's us now, it will be the pastors next. This is what he's saying in regards to why gay conversion therapy is, even though it's a term we don't like, but we know that it includes us and our efforts and our what we offer to clients who are willingly looking for therapeutic options and counseling options to address their sexual conflicts. Why this therapy should not be banned. And he's making the appeal to all these so-called conservatives and Republicans in name only, even though he's in the UK, but you know, we've got all these so-called conservatives. Even the UK has people in their so-called conservative party who have fallen for the myths about conversion therapy, because the LGBT lobby has been unrelenting in their attack and in their propagation of falsehoods, so that even conservatives, even people who may not support the LGBT agenda, they would never come to defense of the counselors and that offer this type of counseling and the ex-gays, ex-LGBT people themselves. People are only starting to speak up when it comes to the trans issue, because that's where, like, well, okay, that's a line too far. So they're starting to speak up now when it comes to that. But even then, there's a very silent amount of people. So we're thinking, well, let's just sort of be cool. Let's let it play out. But Mike is being serious. If it's us now, it will be the pastors next. You think that it's just therapists that are going to come after? No. Sam Brinton from the Trevor Project already announced in a meeting with Google that their plan is to go after churches and pastors next. They just got to find a way to make it work. Another helpful thing in the Christian Today article with Mike Davidson is Mike points out that the whole conversion therapy term was coined by an APA, American Psychological Association, activist for gay rights named Douglas Haldeman back in 1991. So it's not even a term that originated with the actual therapists who do this work. And if you go to just the abstract to the article, this is how he refers to it. Efforts by both mental health professionals and paraprofessionals, i.e. or e.g. pastoral care providers, to convert lesbians and gay men to heterosexuality. So it's their language. They're taking. That's why we refuse to use the term conversion therapy, because it's nothing we've ever used to describe our work. We're not converting people as in a complete categorical change. Now, I don't have too much of a problem with the idea of conversion in that when you look at the actual definition of the word conversion, it means to change function. Well, if you're functioning sexually in one way and you then change the way you function or the way you orient yourself, then that would count as a conversion of sorts. So at face value, I don't necessarily have a problem with the term. But because of all the connotations it's developed over the years and the way the propaganda has associated it with aversion techniques and coercion, I don't use it. And neither does any of the professionals or counselors or pastors and ministries in this field. Fast forward to last week. Some of my colleagues noticed that Restored Hope Network's Facebook page was missing, coming up completely blank when you search for it. And we're thinking, oh no, here's where the hammer's dropping now. We tried to search for it, tried to find out what was happening, and then Brandon Showalter from the Christian Post released an interview with Ann Palk. She's the executive director and co-founder of Restored Hope Network, confirming our suspicions that Facebook removed their entire page without warning, without explanation, without any ability for recourse. Now, she's going to try to fight it, I'm sure, but who knows? They already made their commitment that their community standards will involve banning anything that promotes what they consider conversion therapy. Now, why is this important? What is Restored Hope Network? Restored Hope Network is the biggest organization and umbrella ministry for various ministries, pastors, counselors who provide help for people with unwanted same-sex attraction and gender confusion. It is the largest organization of its kind. And now you can't even find them on Facebook, and I'm guessing Instagram as well. I don't have an Instagram account, so I don't know for sure. The biggest social media platforms, you can't even find out about them. Now, the way we live our lives these days is pretty much in that if someone doesn't have a social media presence, you don't know they exist. If you're not on YouTube, no one's going to see your video. If you're not on Facebook, no one's going to read up about you and see your press releases. Once they can deplatform you, then they don't even have to worry about you. They've done it to various individuals who used to have presences on social media, and once they're deplatformed, they're pretty much unpersoned. For example, I tried to share an old video from a person, Thomas Robinson, from the UK, just about him confronting one of his trolls on social media. And because Facebook had deemed him a dangerous individual, I got punished just for sharing a video of his. Even though it was actually a good video and he had a productive conversation with this person, it wasn't violent in any way or didn't lead to any terribly bad conflict. It was actually very productive. Didn't matter. He was deemed like Voldemort. You must not speak of him. Proud Boys. Everyone was talking about Proud Boys. So I tried to post from their actual page, their actual website, what their values are, what they believe in. And Facebook wouldn't allow me because that violated their standards, their community. But you could talk about them. You could use all these other media sources that will misrepresent them. But if you tried to share their actual page information, nope, not allowed. So that's what will happen. It'll get to the point where you're not allowed to get information from the source. You can only get it from other pages that are going to misrepresent and malign the so-called conversion therapists and reparative therapists and sexual orientation change efforts, SOCI practitioners. So the only representation you're going to get is going to be skewed. See, this means that social media is now limiting and controlling access to information. Most people don't go on actual websites anymore. They just go to their Facebook feed, their Instagram, and they get the information from there. Like, heck, I barely ever go on actual websites, unless I'm shopping for something. If I want to check the news, I go to my feed because I already subscribe to most of my news sources on my Facebook feed. So your ability to get information will be limited because they know how the culture now works. They have been accustomed now to getting their information just from social media. Well, once social media bans everything, you're not going to get it. And if you try to share from some alternative media source, it's a matter of time before they get banned as well. You won't be able to share anything from Parler or from BitChute or Minds. And it's already going to be tough to build up a social media presence or a following on those sites, and it'll just be a matter of time before not allowed to share from them. And it's tragic because the reality is I wouldn't have found out about Restored Hope Network if it wasn't for Facebook. For years I had known about Exodus International. They had been around since the 60s or early 70s, but so I'd always known about them as the umbrella ministry for people struggling with same-sex attraction. And so when I was in grad school and really feeling like I was alone in this field as a therapist, because guess what? There's not a ton of us out there. You may hear about us subjecting millions of people to conversion therapy. That's a lie. Therapists who offer help for people with unwanted same-sex attraction are few and far between. And so it can get pretty lonely as a practitioner in this area. Just someone who's willing to work with people. It's not like this is the main type of client I work with. I'm a journalist. I work with all sorts of clients. But, as just someone who supports this type of work, I felt like I was alone. So when I discovered that, Exodus has a Facebook page, I followed them on Facebook while I was in grad school. But around that time, 2010, 2011, there was a lot of controversy going on because the last president of Exodus, Alan Chambers, was clearly moving away theologically and doctrinally, philosophically, from the actual mission of Exodus. And so he was steering the ship in the wrong direction, and then he came to a point where he banned all ministries, kicked them out of Exodus, any ministry that supported the idea of change and attraction. So that way, the only ministries that would be allowed left were those that just helped people with coping with the same-sex attraction and helped them change behaviors, but didn't offer any counseling to help potentially change attractions. So when that happened, and we're seeing things lead up to that, Restored Hope Network formed. And I wasn't aware that they had formed until at the time that Exodus itself closed in 2013. And I saw someone in one of the comments on the Facebook page for Exodus mention Restored Hope Network. And I was like, oh, what's that? I didn't realize they had formed a year earlier. So that's how I discovered them, and it became an encouragement to me. So then I was able to watch their videos online, read their posts, and finally go to one of their conferences in 2015. And that's where I really got to meet so many of my heroes in this field and get the encouragement I needed when I was being persecuted in grad school for the work I do. So if it wasn't for Facebook and the platform of just allowing people just a variety of views to have a community online, I would not have heard about them. And now I fear for people who are just starting to look into this stuff and want to get the truth, want to find out if there's options available, they're not going to have access. They're not going to even know, because pretty much if it's not on social media, it doesn't exist pretty much. And so when the general population hears only one version of the story, it makes it so much easier for the government to just sweep away our rights without a fight. That's why it's so important to make sure we have judges at all levels, especially the Supreme Court, who believe in the Constitution. This is why New York City repealed their own conversion therapy ban for minors just last year. New York City passed a ban against any counseling that will help people explore change in attractions or change in behaviors regarding sexuality. And a therapist named Dovid Schwartz, a Jewish therapist, sued the city. And the city realized if this goes to one of the judges, one of the constitutionalist judges that Trump appointed, this whole ban will be overturned. So they decided to repeal it themselves last September 2019. And so now, back in July, the therapist who sued the city just got awarded for all his attorney fees. And so he got justice. And that just shows us how much these LGBTQ plus activists know that what they're doing is unconstitutional. That to tell a client what they can and cannot discuss with their therapist, and to tell a therapist what topics are off limits, is a complete violation of free speech and violation of a freedom of religion for those who are religiously motivated to explore orientation change or attraction and behavior change. And so they know if a Supreme Court or any court of that matters is seated with judges that actually care about the Constitution, these bans will get overturned. And so if one gets overturned, the rest will soon follow, or potentially could all follow. And so that's why New York City knew enough, all right, let's just repeal it ourselves. So we can't create this tidal wave of bans being overturned. But that's what we need. We need one of these lawsuits to go to the highest court of the land and show how unconstitutional they are. And that's why it's so important to have on the Supreme Court judges who actually care about our rights. So no, Joe Biden, if you really want to fight for freedoms of people with same-sex attraction and gender confusion or gender non-conformity, then fight for the rights to change their mind. Fight for the rights to obtain the counseling that matches their own values, and stop silencing the voices of former or post-gay, once-gay, ex-gay individuals. Give them back their platform. Give them back the ability to share their stories and fight for the rights for them to speak up and not be harassed, not to be banned and censored by social media or any other platform. Talking to you, Amazon, banning books by people who've actually experienced change. Once you take out the testimonies, it's really easy to make it sound like change is not possible. But they're out there, and they're not going to be silent. And though I may not be one of them, I'm not going to be silent either. I'm going to speak up for them, even if it means I might lose my platform on Facebook or even YouTube. I don't know. So far, YouTube's been good to me, or, enough that it hasn't banned me. But I'm not going to be silent. So I implore you, please don't be silent either. Contact Facebook, contact Instagram, and tell them you do not appreciate them removing one of the voices out there for people with unwanted same-sex desires, attractions, behaviors, and gender confusion and non-conformity. Speak up for those who can't speak for themselves anymore. They are literally becoming people without a voice because they're being banned. Alright, I'm fired up. I hope you are too, though. You should be angry about this, because it's not going to stop with these ministries. It's going to come to your family, your schools, your churches, where you must support a particular doctrine. So join us. Please don't just watch us. The so-called conversion therapists, the therapists in this field of unwanted same-sex attraction, we have been the canaries in the coal mine for years, and we've been ignored by our brothers in the church, by their so-called conservatives. I'm talking to you, Ben Shapiro. Daily Wire, you guys will speak out about Black Lives Matter, but you won't speak up when it comes to this area, because you guys too have fallen for this conversion therapy myth that's out there. So do some research, check my video series on the myths and misunderstandings about conversion therapy, and then speak up. Speak up for those who are losing their ability to speak for themselves. Alright. As usual, please don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe. God bless.